Good afternoon. We are delighted to welcome you to the NMC On the Horizon Natural User Interfaces. This series reflects the NMC project in action. In today's one-hour program, Rob Cato, the program director for Game Studies at Full Sail University, will moderate this live panel discussion on natural user interfaces. I'm your host today, Alex Freeman, the director of special projects here at the NMC. I'm joined by Holly Ludgate and Michelle Cummins. If you have any kind of technical issues, please drop something in the Q&A and we'll make sure to answer that for you. Now, for the moderator of today's program. For more than 20 years, Rob Cato has served as an innovative leader in the fields of education and technology. Currently, Rob holds the position of program director for the Game Studies degree programs at Full Sail University. In this role, Robert is responsible for managing and creating procedures in regard to the design, structure, quality, consistency, and continuity of the program curriculum, while ensuring student satisfaction. Go ahead and take it away, Rob.
Thank you, Alex. Well, welcome, everyone. Today we've got three wonderful panelists, each representing a different sector of education, from K-12 to post-secondary to museums serving the public. Each of these panels is using MUIs in their respective environments, and I'd like to start out with Jennifer Foley. Jennifer is the Director of Interpretation at Cleveland Museum of Art. Jennifer, that's quite a unique title. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do as the Director of Interpretation and how you are using NUIs at the museum in that environment?
Sure. So in interpretation, we do quite a number of things in the museum. It is everything from having a review of the didactics that end up on the walls in the museum to creating the content that is in our app, to training docents to talk about our collection, to audio tours. We do all sorts of things. A lot of it is really just thinking about the visitor in the museum and how to create structures for engagement so that people can make meaning while they're here. One of the things that we've done in the last year and a half, 2 years or so, we had two projects that were interrelated, one of which is a museum-wide collection-focused app that's called ArtLens. And that was initially launched for iPad and then was subsequently launched for iPhone, and we're going to be releasing an Android version in the next couple of months. So that's one way in which we sort of integrated the use of natural user interfaces, is to use technology like the iPad and utilize the way in which that allows you to have those sort of natural gestures be part of your experience. The other thing that we did was opened Gallery 1, which is a space that integrates education, interpretation, and technology into the space. So we have works of art in the space. We also have interactive touch screens, multi-touch screens. We have one that uses a Kinect. So we have integrated that into the actual physical space of the museum as well.
So with the iPad, as someone walks through the facility, what are they actually doing with the iPad?
It has functionality that allows for location recognition. So there is a map that in live time is telling you where you are in the museum. It then pulls up what objects are in the gallery that you're in and which ones have extended interpretation. And then you can do a number of things from there. You can tap into a high-res image of the object. You can listen to videos that were created where we interviewed curators, community members, conservators, all sorts of people to talk about various works of art. It also has the functionality of, on selected objects, it has image recognition. So you can scan a work of art and then pull up another layer of interpretive information.
Are you guys currently using anything with augmented reality?
That scanning function does have an AR component to it. So when you scan the work of art, it then pulls up a visual layer that overlays, that gives you options for which pieces of information or interpretive videos you would like to pull up that are connected to that.
For anybody with an iPad or an iPhone, the NASA has a very, very unique AR app that lets you take a look at all their different spacecraft in 3D. Go to NASA's site and you can download it. It's really quite unique. So next I'd like to introduce Jonathan Lee. Jonathan is the visiting professor at the Highlands University in New Mexico. Jonathan has the privilege of playing around with a lot of new technologies that have come out that use NUIs that people are beginning to play around with, like Leap Motion and Connect. He also has just showed us the Makey Makey. So Jonathan, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing and how you're using these technologies.
So I'm a professor of software systems design, and we teach anything from C++, web, mobile, and then the cool classes are interfaces, which is where we use all of our NUIs, and we also do in web a little bit. We use the Leap Motion, which you can program with JavaScript. We also have a huge push for cultural technology, which is one of our cornerstones of our department, and that usually translates to museum exhibits. So our students work in a practicum class, and they make exhibits for actual museums. One of the exhibits we made recently used the Kinect. It was for the Santa Fe Art Museum. They had these Bauman marionettes, physical marionettes, that were very fragile and they couldn't bring out to the public very often. About once or twice a year they would take them out and then they'd put on a show, but the public didn't get to interact with them or see them very often. So what we did was we scanned them using photogrammetry, and then we placed them into a Unity environment and used a Kinect plugin so that a person could actually embody the marionette. However, they moved, their skeleton would be mapped to the marionette skeleton, and it was not a one-to-one movement because what we wanted to show was how the marionettes were jointed. So if you moved your wrist and the marionette had no wrist, its wrist wouldn't move. So we're trying to teach the public about the collection while they were using these natural user interfaces. They would walk up to the screen, choose their marionette, step back, and then just move.
A lot of the new technology that's come out has dropped in costs and prices, and it's made it very affordable for institutions to be able to use it. Technologies like Kinect and the Makey, what kind of price point are we talking about?
With the Kinect, you can buy it on Amazon for about $100, brand new. You can get some refurbished ones a little bit cheaper. You do need to buy the one that comes in the box with the special adapter that plugs into the wall, otherwise you won't be able to plug it into your computer. The Leap Motion, I believe, is $80, so you can buy it at Best Buy or other online retailers. And the Makey, I didn't buy this, so I'm not really sure how much it is, but it's very cheap. We also use Arduinos, which I believe are $75.
What kind of resources are available for people out there right now for these technologies? Not everybody is going to be a software designer like you.
It is a little bit difficult with the Kinect, especially if you're not a software designer. We did use an open source. We used an open source driver and an open source plugin for Unity. So there wasn't a whole lot of programming really that we had to do for the Unity application. We had to research what was best to use, but once we actually put all those things in, it was more we had to get a modeling team and someone who could put a skeleton into the model. The one problem though with the open source stuff is that it closes down or gets bought up. So during the course of that project, which was about a year and a half, we used 3 different plugins because the first one was bought by Intel, I believe, and the second one just closed down, and then the third one is the one we're using now. So that is a problem with open source. The other issue with the Kinect was we do mostly Macs here, primarily work on Macs, but it didn't work on the Mac. We had to go with a PC.
So finally, Megan Wilson is the technology integrator at Avenues, the World School. Right now, a K through 10 school. They're working on grades 11 and 12. Next year, they'll add grade 11 from my conversations with Megan. Megan, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're using NUIs, and please tell us a little bit about iPodabilities.
Sure. So my background is actually in special education, and my focus has always been on really creating learning opportunities for students of all abilities. And technology I fell into because it was an opportunity to really give students an opportunity to have the access to the right tools to really show what they know in a way that worked for them. And so Disabilities is a website that I started just to kind of share with other teachers opportunities for students to get involved in technology. I fell into the world of touchscreen technology with the iPods, and I'm known around here as an iPad maniac, and it definitely suits me. So we do a lot with iPads here at Avenues. We're actually nursery through 10th grade this year, and so our nursery and our pre-K kids have access to iPads, and then kindergarten up are one-to-one with iPads. So we've had a lot of opportunities to look at how the iPad can be used to really enhance and really redefine the learning space as we know it. We kind of joke at Avenues that we probably should have picked a mascot called the guinea pigs because we really will try anything, but which is a really great opportunity for us in teaching and learning to really push the boundaries and look at what is available for kids and giving them the right tools or the right opportunities to fit the need in the world that we currently live in. So we really do rely on things like Siri to improve students' efficiency and their workflow in the classroom. So really, like I said, having the right tool. But then we also use a lot of augmented reality for creating different learning zones and other apps on the iPad that can really take a student to a physical location where they can actually virtually view a location that we can't up and move them to have that learning experience. So we get to play with a wide range of different technologies. We're doing some fun things with Google Glass. We have played with the Kinects and the Leap Motion a little bit, looking at if we want to do mainstream things with that in the school. But we've done some really fun activities around all these different tools.
We were talking earlier, and I had put up a link to Personify, and you took a look at it. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what that technology is and what you thought was so interesting about it?
Yeah, it was the first time. I was so happy that somebody posted that. I hadn't heard of them, and that is something that really is the essence of what we're trying to do at Avenues. Avenues was started as one campus in New York City. It is our first location of 20 campuses to open worldwide. And the idea really is not that we have 20 campuses, but that we have one school in 20 different locations where our students are really connected to each other and have opportunities to really be truly global citizens. So we really rely on technology to foster those connections. And currently we do a lot of global connections with outside schools, but we're always looking for the right tool that when our Beijing campus, which is the next campus to open, when that opens in the next year and a half, that how are we really going to give students a really meaningful chance to share collaborative learning spaces. So when I saw the Personify, it's really an interesting tool because it actually takes the person and overlays it. They started off by showing a PowerPoint or a keynote presentation, but you actually can overlay yourself onto shared websites and other collaborative zones on the internet. So I think the possibilities of actually being able to look at somebody, that's something that we can never replace, is the ability to hear somebody's voice, to see their face, to have them be a part of that experience. You know, technology is never going to replace our teachers. To be able to take your teacher with you or to bring them into your zone in that sense where you really are with them, you see their movements and you can really hear what's going on and their gestures impact what they're saying. I think it's really an amazing opportunity. So I like that you can do presentations and you can kind of get your message across. I think that was a really interesting thing. But when the video goes on and they start talking about how you have these, you can really refer to these shared learning spaces, whether it's a different website or a different zone that you've created. I think the opportunities for our people to collaborate on a global level are really amazing, and I'm really, really excited. I think that's a really great opportunity.
So the technology that Megan was talking about requires a 3D camera, and that is what the Kinect is. ASUS has a device out that you can get also that's a 3D camera, but as Jonathan has already mentioned, the Kinect is available now for plus or minus $100, which really makes this technology affordable. Personify is a subscription-based technology, but in my dealings with them, it's been relatively reasonable. Take a look at it, personifyinc.com, and take a look at the video, because I think you'll really be amazed. So there was a question earlier about what the Makey was, and so I'm going to turn this back to Jonathan and ask Jonathan to talk a little bit about what that is and maybe a couple of the other technologies he's been playing around with.
So the Makey is a microcontroller. It uses these old Nintendo controller sort of design to teach kids about electronics. And if you don't know what a microcontroller is, it's a programmable chip. You can see the chip there, that then you can plug physical readings into, physical, I don't know what it is, interface. There you go. That's what we're talking about, right? Physical interfaces into. So it comes with all of these alligator clips and a USB cable. You'll type some code on the computer, and then you'll download that to your chip, and then you clip the USB clip into the little holes. Sorry, not USB, alligator clip, and they're all color-coded. So you find the red one, and you clip it to something else, and that will, whenever you complete that circuit, it will register as a click, as it says there on the microcontroller. And this thing is designed to teach children about electronics very easily. If you go to their website, makeymakey.com, you can see a video of a banana keyboard. So they're using actual bananas that they wired into a keyboard, and when you press each one, they play different sounds. The goal of this is then you get to something more complex like the Arduino. The Arduino has no little clips or anything like that. It has tons of pins, as an actual microcontroller does. So once you learn that idea about the clips and how to complete the circuit and then how your code works with a physical object, then you can start doing something a little more powerful with this. But the Makey Makey is actually quite powerful as well. I don't teach these classes, I just play around with these. So I'm not the authority on these, but if you want more information, I can put you in touch with that person.
There are a lot of resources out there for both those products. The Raspberry Pi is another example of the microcontroller that folks are using. And again, it does require programming, but there are also many kits available that provide instructions on how to put them together and also code that you can use that's already been pre-made. This brings me back to a question about NUIs and their place in school. This is a lot of very cool technology, and for some folks, it's going to be unaffordable to them. Are we looking at NUIs in schools and places of education just for technology's sake, or are we really paying attention to the cost benefits of both? Megan, you being in K through 12 probably have a unique environment. I'll start with you with those questions.
Yeah, I definitely think that they have a place in education. I've always said teachers should be in the business of making memories. That is where our students learn the most, when you create a memorable opportunity. And I think when you start looking at technology as being a really natural component and extension of what we do, and really lending itself to opportunities that you don't have in your actual environment that you're in, what we're really doing is not only creating memorable moments, but we're really creating opportunities and experiences that we just don't have access to give students within the realms of our 4 classroom walls. If we can do anything with our K through 12 students, it's really creating students that are problem solvers and innovators and having opportunities to use the tools that are going to rule the world that they live in when they leave us. We'd be doing a disservice if we didn't give them opportunities to have access to these. Not to mention that we rely on a lot of these tools to get the job done because it's a tool. It's not a fun toy. Although we love the engagement that technology offers students, we know engagement isn't everything. We certainly recognize that, but we also know that if students aren't engaged, they're not invested in their own learning. So I think there's a lot of different facets to why we should be exploring this and why we should continue to move in this path. It certainly is a lot of opportunities for redefining our learning experience.
Yeah, I think the key you mentioned there was the fact that this is a tool. Mm-hmm. And just because it's an interesting piece of technology, the technology is not going to make somebody learn. It will help somebody become more engaged, and as a result of that engagement, we'll learn. I don't want to get into budgets or anything, but how do you get around actually affording the technology that you're implementing and using in your classrooms?
Yeah, absolutely. Technology is part of what we budget to do. Like any other school, we operate on a budget. Because we are a newer school, technology was at the forefront of a lot of our decision making. So when it came to looking at tools like the iPad, we looked at what really is the iPad and what tools are built into the iPad or easily accessible by the iPad, and what does that replace in our classroom. So if you think about how schools spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on those pull-down maps that aren't updated, our free map app is constantly updated and built into our iPad. We look at different learning materials. We don't use a lot of textbooks. We have access to a lot of different resources through the iPad. So when it came to budgeting, we just looked at our budget differently. Instead of budgeting, paper in our printers and for textbooks and pull-down maps and a lot of the other tools that we didn't have access to before the iPad, they're now in one device. So it simply was a matter of shuffling what typical needs are in a classroom and just seeing what was offered through there. And then when it comes to also adding apps and things, obviously the iPad isn't great on its own. You want third-party apps to really build your classroom experience. So we do have a budget set aside each year per student on what we allow for apps. So that gives us a little wiggle room. But I think if schools aren't thinking ahead and thinking, I'm going to need to purchase apps, then that can kind of become an issue later in the line, down the line. So something for schools to think about. But it's also, like I said, just rethinking what you use your budget money on, which is really what we did.
Jennifer, from the museum standpoint, how are you guys budgeting for new technology?
Oh, budgets are always an interesting issue. I think we were in sort of a unique position in terms of the development of both the ArtLens app and Gallery One, in that we very early on in the project received a donation that really backed up being able to move in that direction. And I think we're now at a point where Gallery One has been open for almost a year and a half. We are sort of in the process of thinking about what the refresh of that space is going to be and thinking about the ways in which we're going to be budgeting for that. But I do think one of the big lessons that comes out of it is that when you are doing your budgeting, it is a tool, and tools change over time, and that you can't sort of get married to whatever that particular tool is, because there are other things that are going to be coming up, and also the things that you have are going to break. So you sort of have to make sure that you plan for that to happen. If you're getting something, get two, because you'll need the second one later. And so I think that was maybe our big lesson from budgeting.
So we've got a question from listeners. It applies to what is actually a natural user interface. So I'll go down through all three of you and get your definition of what a natural user interface is. And Jennifer, since you're up, I'll go ahead and throw that one to you first.
I think of it as anything that is utilizing the natural gestures that we already use in order to sort of move through and manipulate your experience. Things like touch screens, in which you are using your natural hand gestures to control what's happening, rather than using an interface like a keyboard or a mouse. iPads, the touch screens that we have in the gallery, the multi-touch screen that we have in the collection wall.
Jonathan?
Similar idea. It's just something that feels natural. I mean, clicking a mouse isn't necessarily natural. It's a translation of your finger tap onto the screen. So if you can actually push your finger on the screen and do something, that's much more natural. And if you can wave your hands around and not even have to interact with the screen, that's even more natural. So a natural user interface to me is just something that doesn't feel forced whenever you're trying to interact with some data.
Megan, they've probably given your definition already.
Yeah, I mean, the only word I would add is, just intuitive. I think something that I'm constantly amazed of, because we do give technology to our little guys. When you look at a 3-year-old and how they can interact with an iPad, it's just intuitive. It is a natural extension of what they expect technology to do. So just absolutely, and building on also not only what's natural, but just using gestures to make things easier. So we love Google Glass because you can take a picture by winking. You don't have to actually stop what you're doing. You just wink. You can take a picture. So also having just opportunities by using gestures you're used to using. So
in 2002, there was a movie called The Minority Report, and Tom Cruise played a character in there. And if you haven't seen it, go take a look at it. But that is probably the most descriptive natural user interface that I've ever seen, and we are close to being at that point today. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but I posted a link the last time we got together. And for those of you listening, there's a device out there called the Myo, M-Y-O, from Thalmic Labs. All you got to do is search for the Myo, and you'll see it. It's a band that goes on your wrist. It not only picks up inertial data, which is the turning of the wrist, but it also picks up muscle information from your wrist. And as a result, you are able to do a lot of the natural gestures that you are used to doing. They haven't come out with that device yet, but it's supposed to be out this year. I've already got mine pre-ordered. But take a look at it, because that, along with the Oculus, which Facebook just purchased the company for $2 billion, and are planning to have a huge, huge set of people playing around with the Oculus in a Facebook environment. But that combination is going to bring us pretty close to what the Minority Report really demonstrated. Speaking of the Oculus, I've got one here. This is a virtual reality helmet that came out a year ago and is the talk of the town. It's won several awards at the latest technology events. But I'm wondering if any of you three have seen and are planning to use this in your different learning environments. Jennifer, I'll start with you, because you've got the museum environment, which I think would be able to use this quite readily.
We don't have any plans yet, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that we're thinking of. I think it has been part of discussions. I think we're sort of trying to figure out how to integrate that into a situation in which you have lots and lots of people there at the same time. Like how can that be made to feel a little like natural? So we're not quite there yet. I'm curious to know what other people are doing now.
Jonathan, I'm going to save you to last. Megan?
So I think it's something that's being discussed. We don't have one in our hands, so we haven't actually tried anything, but we are definitely open to the idea of really having an immersive learning experience, and I think the opportunities that come with that are definitely have some potential, but we don't have one in our hands to play with currently.
Jonathan, you seem to be looking at it.
Yeah, we definitely want to get one. We don't have one either yet. But as far as involving more than one person, what I've seen a lot is that they broadcast the feed of what's happening, and then you can see the person interacting with it as well. So it's a watcher mentality that you have, and then maybe you want to jump into it as well. But it's just sort of funny to watch someone do it too. So I think even if you just had one person doing it, at the time you just have one, it still is a group activity if you can broadcast that other person's experience.
As soon as I've been in virtual reality since 1993, and in 1994 I had a full immersive VR lab in a high school. So the possibilities of having this technology in educational environments, even with budget restrictions, is possible. But over the years, the whole concept of virtual reality as an interface and a natural user interface has been restricted to the military and the medical institutions and medical research. With the advent of the Oculus, it has not only made it affordable, because the device is probably going to be at around a price point of around $300, but it also has kicked off a huge group of people that have looked at it and began to develop alternative interface devices that use this technology, and one of them is called the Virtuix Omni, and it is a device that you get into, and it allows you to walk basically with the helmet on and travel and run and jump and do all kinds of interactive things, very natural user motions, as opposed to using WASD or the arrow functions. But in a museum environment or in a post-secondary or K-12 environment, if you could give somebody a device that would let them walk around, what do you think they could do with it, and what would you do with it? Jonathan, I'll start with you.
Again, we would probably build a museum exhibit with it. We have something out here where you can walk. We're in New Mexico, in case you didn't know that. But we have something out here in our museum where you can walk virtually with a trackball across the plains and see some of the petroglyphs. And it would be cooler if you could actually walk, right, and then turn, and you wouldn't have to use that old trackball interface, which isn't very, very interesting or intuitive. So if I would probably replace trackballs in current exhibits that we had, that would be the first thing I would do with it. Something like that, some sort of exploratory app.
Jennifer, Jonathan sees this as being appropriate for a museum. What do you think?
I mean, I could see a lot of different ways in which it could be applied. I think, you know, the two that come to mind immediately are a sort of potential for creating exhibitions that could be experienced as if they were a real space, that would bring together objects that could never actually be together in person for a variety of reasons about lenders and things like that, or you know, the safety of an object, the conservation of an object. There are some things that can't travel. And so there are times when you might have objects that you would love to see in a space together, but it's just not actually possible. The other thing that I could imagine being something that would really add a new experience to things would be to be able to experience the context from which an object came in connection with it. So if it was originally something that was, you know, an architectural piece, to be able to experience the architecture as it was, particularly for things that don't exist anymore. I think it gives context to objects that can bring them to life in ways that it's hard to do without having an immersive experience.
Megan?
Immersive, I think, is the best word. I think there's an opportunity here to put students in a learning space that we, like I said, we can't offer them. I love the idea of creating these spaces, and maybe even, like you said, letting students be the creators of these spaces, where they can be immersed in an experience that you can't give them within the four walls of your classroom.
So one of the comments that was made was in the Q&A section related to natural language processing. Do you folks know of anything related to voice recognition other than Siri that would be considered a natural user interface that is currently being used?
Well, there's the Google Voice thing as well, but we build mobile apps here for the iPhone, and there are several services you could subscribe to where it processes the voice, sends it to the cloud, tells you what's going on, and sends it back to you. But no, we haven't really been using any of that kind of stuff, so I can't speak to that.
Jennifer, in the museum environment, how do you deal with folks that have got physical disabilities? You have any devices that you use to help them with their experience?
Not at the moment, although we have actually talked a lot about what the possibilities are, even with iPad. For visitors that are visually impaired, we now have videos that have audio on them that can be experienced, but we have actually talked a lot about adding layers of it that would be highly descriptive layers of audio that are more like when you're trained to do tours in museums. For people who are visually impaired, if they're not touch tours, there's a type of tour in which it's highly descriptive. So we've talked about adding those layers into the app as it stands now to add a layer that would be there specifically for visitors who are visually impaired. But I think it's something that we've had a lot of discussions about what the possibilities are. We're not quite to the point of launching anything.
From a natural user interface perspective, why did the three of you choose the devices that you're currently using in your respective areas? Was it cost? Was it convenience? Was it availability? I'll start with you, Megan.
Because we have an iPad for every student, there was a lot of thought into why we did that. And one, like I said, was part of when we budgeted classroom tools, looking at how that device did give students a lot of tools in one spot that is mobile and goes where they go, and that was really, really important. Some of the technology we've talked about today is not mobile, but the iPad is mobile, and really that was a big, big reason that we wanted our students to have access to that. It was a tool when they need it, where they need it, and really did take learning outside of the classroom. It was also, I think, looking at what's accessible, not only to different ages, because we have such a range of students in our building, but different abilities. So when you look at people with disabilities, the iPad is still, you are able to interact to it. I can use Siri to talk to my iPad, and whether you need to do that because you have a physical disability or you need that because it's part of how you learn and how you work better, having those opportunities are really, really important to giving all students opportunities to access tools and different opportunities. So I think when you look at the mobility and the accessibility to different ages and abilities, it really did give us a lot of opportunities. And of course, being such an intuitive device, nobody wants to give training to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and the iPad was really an intuitive device that didn't require a lot of pre-knowledge or experience in using it. So that was a big reason we chose that. When you look at other tools like Google Glass, those are things that we're looking at. Are they something we want to make more mainstream, and just still trying to figure out if that is the right fit for the classroom.
So if every one of your students has received an iPad, are they allowed to take these home, or are they handed out as they come to school?
It depends on what they're using them for, but yes, our students certainly are allowed to take their iPads home. It really is an extension of what we do here in the classroom. We try our best to treat it as a tool. So if you can imagine telling students they can't take their notebook home and they can't take their pens and their pencils and their art brushes, they can't take their saxophone home, things like that. It certainly is an extension of what they do and who they are here. So yes.
What are the challenges you've faced with every student having that technology and taking it home?
A lot of the challenges we face are not necessarily educational challenges. A lot of it becomes management at home. There's a lot of parents that we like to talk to about really what does technology look like in the home environment, not just the classroom environment, because I think there is a culture of allowing technology to just take over in some aspects. So just, reminding everyone that it's always best to use anything in moderation. So I think that's a big conversation that we're constantly having is talking to families about how students manage technology outside of the educational requirements that we have put in place, as well as different opportunities to learn on their own, which we certainly do want them to take advantage of, but not getting lost in a world of technology either.
Have you ever had a student lose theirs or damage it?
Yeah, sure, of course. They're kids, absolutely.
And how do you address that? Or is this something that you replace, or is this something that the parents have to?
So we do have insurance on our devices. We were very thoughtful about students and technology. So there is an insurance plan in place. It is at a cost to families if things are maliciously broken. Accidents happen. We certainly understand that. I don't know about anybody else on the panel, but I have accidentally broken my iPhone 3 times, and I promise it was on accident. We do recognize that accidents happen, but we don't have issues with students actually being malicious towards their equipment. They've come to rely on their equipment to do what they need to do, and when they don't have access to it, it does create issues for them. So we find that if we do have things with breakage or lost items, it really isn't a malicious piece. So we do have Find My iPad turned on, so we have been able to locate a few missing iPads, but that is not the norm either for students to actually lose their devices. We see more of the occasional breakage.
So Jennifer, how do you deal with managing and implementing the technology? Because if visitors to the museum are walking around with iPads, there is that possibility that iPad walks out of the museum with a visitor on accident.
Sure, and I think we had a lot of discussions about that before launching the app. And the app is available in the iTunes store, so in fact the vast majority of people who are using it are doing it on their own devices. But we do have a certain number of devices that we have here that are available for visitors who don't have their own device to use. I will say one thing that has been really surprising is that the percentage of people who are bringing their own device. And we had a lot of discussions of, are we going to have enough devices? And it turns out that we've never actually seen all of them out at the same time. Like, we've never had a shortage in terms of that. And the other thing is that in the entire time that we've been doing this, we've also never had one walk away. And I know in talking to people at other museums who also have devices that they've given out, whether it's iPods, which is something that we did in the past, or iPads or other devices, they do sometimes depart from the building, but I think it's actually a really small percentage, and we had kind of planned for, all right, a certain number of these may break, or they may walk away, and there are contingency plans for being able to shut it down remotely and things like that. But it's actually something we've just never had happen. So we've been very lucky, but I also think some of this, like things like there amongst our visitors, there's a pretty high percentage who own their own, so there's less of a sort of desire to take the one from the museum because many people already have one.
Jonathan, I noticed earlier you mentioned that you don't actually have a class on this stuff, but why have you chosen the specific technology that you've been using and playing around with?
No, it's just the microcontrollers I don't have a class on. I do have interface class, which we use the Leap and the Connect, and we were using Wii for a while, and we've experimented with other stuff. But it's just the microcontrollers. I do have several other classes. The reason I chose it is because we're preparing our students for careers, and this is stuff that people are asking for. I mean, people come to our program because we offer a mobile development class. It's one of the biggest things that they want out of our program, because they think, hey, I can make my own iPhone app and then become a millionaire. I do discourage that concept, though, throughout the class. But these are what people are asking for, and our students are often entering into the museum field, and other kinds of exhibit design or interface or interactive, sorry. So they need to know these cutting edge technologies. So because of our budget cycle, we usually get stuff about a year after it's really popular, which is good for us because then we can see what died out and what has some staying power.
So I'm going to ask two last questions here and have all three of you answer them. The first one is, where are your go-to places for resources for technology and NUI information out there on the interweb? Jonathan, I'll go ahead and ask and start with you, and then I'll go to Meg and then to Jennifer.
Okay. I have a Tumblr site that I follow several different technology blogs, and I can see all kinds of really cool things that are coming out. I actually follow quite a few teachers in the same field as me, and I see what they're talking about. That's where I learned about Oculus when it was first coming out as a Kickstarter. That's where I learned about Leap when it was also first coming out. And yeah, Tumblr is my go-to source for that, really, and it's all about picking who you follow. And then as far as support, I just use Google for the most part because most of my questions are on Stack Overflow because I'm into the nitty-gritty questions, not so much the higher level stuff. Most of these sites, like Leap, has full documentation on their website for what you need to get started. Makey as well. Connect is a little funkier because if you're not using a Windows box, then you can't use the Microsoft SDK, so you have to find something that's open source, and in which case those all have big communities around them. We do a lot of open source and maker stuff, so there's a lot of open community on the internet around these things.
I think there's a lot of people on Twitter that I follow, and will post things, particularly in terms of what's happening in museums. There are a few Tumblrs as well, but Twitter is where I end up getting a lot of links to things. The other thing for museums are that there are a number of national conferences, and that's a great place to get to talk to other people. So there's like the Museum Computer Network Conference, which is an annual conference. There's Museums in the Web. And then, to a certain extent, talking to people at AAM, which is the Alliance of American Museums. That's the big conference for museums. And so I think that's really a great to have the chance to talk to other people who are sort of doing similar work or dealing with similar issues or have similar questions, and finding out what other people are using and what they've tried and what has worked and what hasn't.
And Meg?
I'm going to follow up on the Twitter. Twitter, I hands down am a huge advocate. I've learned more from Twitter in the last 3 years than I have in 3 college degrees. And I wholeheartedly stand by that. It's the most up-to-date information that's shared. You can connect with experts. You can connect with companies. It's really an amazing opportunity. I tell teachers in our school all the time, even if you don't want to join Twitter, whatever you think about Twitter, it's not about what Miley Cyrus ate for breakfast. It's not what I did last night with my friends. It can be, but it really, it is an opportunity to connect and communicate and get some of the most up-to-date information. So I heavily rely on Twitter to meet people, to find out new ideas, follow different hashtags. It's been a really important place for me to connect with people, especially companies. Like you said, you can. And if I have an issue, I Google it for support. I certainly do. And usually, if you connect with a company directly, being in the realm of education, it's really a cool time to be involved with technology because companies are really, really open to working with educators and finding ways to make products meet the needs of what you need it to do in your classroom. I really haven't found an instance where a company wasn't responsive or helpful, whether I tweeted them or just found them on their website. So highly recommend Twitter, and when in doubt, Google University is awesome too.
Twitter is an incredible networking tool. I would also suggest people following crowdsourcing or crowdfunding like Kickstarter and whatnot, because there's a lot of folks out there that aren't going to get funding to pursue inventions and ideas, but they are able to get it through these sources, and getting in on the ground floor really makes a difference and helps you in the long run. So take a look at those. There's also the whole maker world. that I would suggest people taking a look at. It is an environment that enables you to take a look at a lot of people that are just inventing new things left and right. You'd be surprised how the makey came through that world, I believe. But also there's websites out there like Inventables and Instructables. We're now at the point where 3D printers are $700 now. Those are areas that I think are important to keep track of. So the last thing I want to bring up is where do you guys see NUIs going? What's the future for this technology and its implications in educational environments, whether at public school system or museum or science center? Jonathan?
As Alex talked about at the Horizon report, the bring your own device movement, I think, is a big thing. And the devices that people are going to start bringing are going to be more and more varied and probably more and more personal. Like, you can look over someone's shoulder and see what they're doing on an iPad, but on a Google Glass, you have to get right up in their face to see that little screen. And that's kind of creepy. So I think it's going to get more and more personal and more closed, I guess. But it's not really closed. It's just a personal experience.
Jennifer?
I feel like the direction it's going to end up going ultimately is more immersive. We're seeing that starting to happen already. The other thing it makes me think about the rise of the experience and the documentation of self-experience. I think that's going to get folded into it as well, like all of the kind of the taking of selfies and things like that we see that sort of portrayal of self in the space of the web, I think is going to get folded into where the next steps are.
Meg?
We're at this point with technology where we really do have an opportunity to personalize education for students, where you can start to tap into students' learning styles and really engage them in a way that we maybe wouldn't be able to do in our typical sit and get models. So I think having that immersive experience where we're creating opportunities that students can't have, that we're personalizing education for them, that we're giving access. Technology, by all means, is opening doors to students of all ages and all abilities that didn't have access to certain experiences and tools before. Like I said, if you're in a wheelchair and you can't move from the neck down, then you can wink and move your eye. You now have access to a world of learning that you didn't have before. So it really is creating opportunities to change how we learn personally and really as an educational system.
A week ago, I read an article about this young lady whose mother was dying of cancer. Her health was so bad that she couldn't go outside the house. And the daughter convinced the Oculus Rift company to send her an Oculus. And they took the Oculus and put it on her head and took her outside and let her walk around and see butterflies, which she was so enamored with. And I think the future holds a lot more of that for us, not just in education, but also in dealing with situations like this. It's not going to be too long from now when you're going to put a set of contacts in your eyes and you're going to be able to go to anywhere you want. And simply moving your hands around with more devices that are more complicated than the Mayo, you're going to be able to take trips that are going to be absolutely phenomenal. The Oculus right now, their version 2 has a resolution of 960 by 1020 per eye, and at some point in time that's going to get up to 4K. The world that you see is going to be about as close to reality as you can get, and students are going to be able to do amazing things with natural user interfaces that in 5 years we'd have never been imagined. And the cost point for all this stuff is going to come down. Used to be, LED TVs and plasma displays were $5,000–6,000. At one point they were $10,000. But as technology continues to develop and people continue to develop these things, the price points are going to get to a point where even educational institutions with whatever budgets they have are going to be able to take advantage of these technologies. And being able to interact with these worlds, whether they're real worlds or whether they're virtual worlds, being able to do it in a natural way is going to make the experience much more immersive. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Alex. I don't know how much more time we've got, Alex, but thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists for a great event. Hope to see you either at a museum or in a virtual world sometime in the future.
All right, thanks, Rob. On behalf of the NMC, I want to thank our moderator, Rob Caddo, and panelists, Jennifer Foley, Jonathan Lee, and Meg Wilson, for taking time to give us their take on natural user interfaces. I was really inspired by seeing the direction where these materials are going, especially for me, having a museum background. I can't wait to go to Cleveland and see for myself what Jennifer has over there. Participants, if you want more information on anything you saw or heard today, let me know by contacting me directly at alex@nmc.org. To learn more about future NMC On the Horizon programs and to get involved in our community, please visit our website at nmc.org, like us on Facebook, or friend us on Twitter at NMCORG. Please save the date for our next NMC On the Horizon program, which is Wednesday, June 4th at noon Central Time, for our NMC On the Horizon event on crowdsourcing. See you next time.